clicks don't pay the bills. You need people to, one, hit that page and then convert into either a paid account or a trial account or like activate, start using the product and then stay with the product.
That's John Henry Scherck, or GH as he calls himself on Twitter. He had stints at some of the most respected SEO agencies and held in-house marketing roles at software companies like WP Engine and Docsend. But for the past 7 years, he's been running Growth Plays, his very own SEO and content agency. GH is without a doubt one of the most experienced and most knowledgeable digital marketers that I ever had a chance to speak with.
This is so good. Can we just cut it out and put it on the landing page of our conference?
You're about to learn how to do marketing for a company if there's no search demand for their product.
I didn't know how to take something that didn't have a lot of search volume and make it work for the market.
Why the zero volume keywords concept makes zero sense.
And if you're going to hinge your career on things that are bringing like 100 clicks a month or whatever, or 200 clicks a month, you need to create so much content.
Why you're seriously missing out if you never attend any industry events.
There is such a connection to taking the online offline and meeting people in the real world.
And when marketing attribution, which I'm very skeptical of, can actually be very useful.
There is a real benefit to being able to point to a chart and say, we wrote this, it brought in that.
My name's Tim Solo, and you're listening to Ahrefs Podcast.
Ahrefs Podcast.
It's actually pronounced Ahrefs.
Oh, sorry, my bad. Let's do it again. Ahrefs Podcast.
Maybe we can start chronologically and discuss your job at Docsend. So you were in charge of marketing there?
Yeah, I can talk about my time at Docsend. I think my time at Docsend was interesting. I think I was really junior, and I was really lucky. I knew some of the founders because we worked in the same co-working space, and they brought me on board. And I'll say one thing that was interesting is like the biggest success I had at Docsend, or that I had a part in Docsend, was actually before I joined. I knew that they had this like phenomenal user data because they could see how often investors were looking at pitch decks, and that's because that's what the product does. If you're not familiar, Docsend is sort of like Google Analytics for PowerPoint decks and documents. Now it's a much more advanced product. It has like e-sign and a lot of other features, but originally it was to send out like a pitch deck kind of when like venture capital was just going wild and a lot of companies were getting funded. And rather than just like not seeing how an investor would interact with your pitch deck, you could see like, oh, did they even look at it? How long did they look at it? And they published this study of...
Did investors know that they're being tracked?
Yeah, and some really didn't like it. And now it's like standard. And a lot of investors actually use it when they raise funds. But yeah, there was like that was definitely like an issue there of people... Specifically, I can think of like one very large investor who was like, do not send that to me. I will not look at it. I'll just skip you around. But Docsend published a study, and the study is no longer live. But you can go to TechCrunch. And if you look at like TechCrunch, Docsend VC study, you can see that. That post from TechCrunch sent so many accounts every day. The thing that was really interesting is you could go in and actually see like real-time analytics in Docsend. And there was generally... on any given day, like 100 to 200 people in that document sometimes at a time, sometimes in a day, but there was hundreds of people visiting that every day because it showed you how your deck should be structured. And I actually kind of talked to the team. I was like, you have this data, and we actually worked with CopyPress to get like the graphics together. We put together this sort of study. TechCrunch wrote it up, and it was hugely effective. And Docsend was interesting. I was there for like 2 years, and I think when I look back on it, I made like a lot of dumb SEO mistakes that like I was like going after, I guess people call them like zero volume keywords, but like there was no real yield. Like not that many people, and like it may work if you're like an affiliate trying to make a few $100 a month or something like that off a website. But if you need to create like a venture scale return, because Docsend had raised a Series A and later it went on to have like a great exit. But I was like going after like keywords like attachment tracking or document tracking, and it just like it didn't matter. Like that's not. I had one really big success there, which was building a case study library. I used a tool from Garrett French, who's like probably one of the best link builders ever. And what we did is we exported all of our target accounts because we were doing account-based marketing. And my manager at the time, because I did come in there to be the first marketer, but they eventually had someone come in and run marketing, really smart guy named Brian Gartner. And he basically sat me down and he was like, listen, we're doing all this like inbound marketing stuff. It's bringing in people who never convert. We need real accounts. We need real people who can use our product. So went to Salesforce, got a list of target accounts, like the accounts that they were named accounts that we wanted to like sign as customers. And then a lot of people were using Docsend for case studies. So I put in the name of the target account and then file type PDF and the word case study. And I scraped a few thousand results. And I found case studies that either featured target accounts or case studies from target accounts. And I built this sort of interactive library. I bought a widget off of like Code Canyon to like create like flippable cards because I had no idea what I was doing in WordPress, and made the whole thing myself. It took way too long. Like, it took like 6 weeks, but it did generate like 10,000 to 12,000 visits a month, sometimes 20,000 visits a month. And that was like a big success there. But looking back on my time
From search.
Yeah, from search. Yeah. And it just had people in it all the time because it was like a great library, and it was like meaningfully better than any other case study library out there. But looking back on my time there, I think I did like a lot of like small bets instead of big bets. And really like, I think I did a lot of random acts of marketing, and where growth plays, like really.
I like the phrase random acts of marketing.
Yeah,
I will write it down.
It wasn't good, but I got lucky a few times, but I definitely had a lot of failure. And I think like one thing that was really a turning point for me and what inspired me to, not inspired me, but was definitely like something in the back of my head when I went out on my own and created Growth Plays was the CEO of the company, Russ, really smart guy, came to me and he was like, I need to know what all this content stuff is doing. Like, I need to know what we're going to be doing in 6 months, what we're going to be doing in a year, and what it's going to do for the business. And like internally, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 2 weeks. This is like, your guess is as good as mine because not all this stuff's working, and like I'm not seeing as much success. And like the product itself was extremely successful because if you invited someone to like view a Docsend link, they would often sign up for Docsend. So like the product grew on its own, and there was some marketing motions that were really effective. AdWords was really effective for them, but I think like I was. And it's funny because like I've actually gotten leads from some of the content that I wrote at Docsend, but like I think so a lot of the content wasn't that successful, and I was slow. I think I was like I knew a lot about marketing, but I don't think I was really like a great marketer at that point. I don't think I knew how to grind it out. Like they needed to create 50, 60, 70 pieces of content a year, and I was doing like one every other week and like managing some AdWords. It was a really valuable lesson for me about what it means to be in like a venture scale business and to be specifically in a place where there isn't a lot of search volume for your product. And like at the time, because I was lazy and I only knew search, I was like, oh, we should get e-signature in the product. And they were years away from doing that. That wasn't the focus at that point. But I wanted e-signature because a lot of people search for e-signature. And I want, and like not a lot of people search for document tracking. So I was at a company that was pre-product market fit, and it quickly got product market fit. But it wasn't like it never really became like a highly searched for category. It was people know Docsend from Docsend. Like it's not a there's of course other solutions you can use, but they built a brand that became synonymous with a category, and I knew how to like go after non-branded keywords. So I'd say in terms of like marketer product match, I probably wasn't the best. I learned a ton, but I think it taught me some hard lessons about like I really only knew how to market commodities because before that I was at WP Engine, which was like WordPress hosting. You rank for WordPress hosting.
WP Engine was before that. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was easy. It was like secure WordPress hosting, enterprise WordPress hosting, fast WordPress hosting.
Wait. Yeah, we'll get into WP Engine separately. I want to discuss that, but let's go back to what you said. Docsend was venture backed.
Yeah. Oh, well, so was WP Engine, but I'm just saying so was Docsend, but at WP Engine, people understood the product and they knew how to buy it, and at Docsend, they really didn't. And so we had to like create a category. We had to do a lot of product marketing and a lot of education, and I just wasn't a mature enough marketer to understand that. So I was like grasping at straws of what the market knew today and what they were searching for, and like running the blog and doing a little bit of like analytics work, but it wasn't leading to venture scale growth. Like Docsend, I think, raised $9 or $10 million in their Series A. They needed to become worth $100 million. And they eventually did exit for, I think, $110 million or something around that. So it did work out for them. But I did not understand that like that is what I had signed up for creating like outsized growth. And the team was phenomenal. They put up with a lot of my bullshit and they really helped me like grow as a marketer. But when I think back on it, I'm like, man, I made so many mistakes because I was just like looking we had an Ahrefs account. So I was like looking at Ahrefs and being like, oh, what do I have keywords for? And I didn't realize like that's not where growth's going to come from. And eventually there was like a product that was kind of, they were fine. They were just kind of older and we did some like competitive content against them, but it just wasn't.
What's the product? You can name it.
Yeah.
You no longer work there.
Yeah. The product was ClearSlide and it was much more like sales focused. And we definitely did some competitive content around that. But it wasn't like, again, it just not huge categories, not huge outsized returns. And really what grew Docsend was the product and the brand and and that product becoming synonymous with tracking pitch decks. And I wasn't a strong enough like product marketer or brand marketer to communicate those things. So I think like for me, Docsend was a really important lesson, but I wouldn't call that like a win in my career. I look back on that time fondly. But I didn't know how to take something that didn't have a lot of search volume and make it work for the market. So great time in my life.
So that's a very interesting topic. First of all, I wanted to quickly make a note on zero volume keywords because it is one of the latest buzzwords in SEO. At least like in the past couple years, people were discussing it a lot. And given that we provide keyword data, we were getting a lot of awkward conversations with people. So from my experience, whenever I saw someone like tweeting or like sharing on LinkedIn about zero volume keywords, I would ask them, can you actually go to your Google Search Console and show me the kind of clicks and impressions you get from these zero volume keywords? Because the thing is, whenever people share their case studies of zero volume keywords, they take a keyword that, shows 0 to 10 in Ahrefs or even not present in Ahrefs, but then they show traffic to a total page. And pages, they don't rank for a single keyword. So there can be a more popular way to search for that thing that you also rank for. And also zero volume keywords, if the topic is broad, they just add up to quite a bit of search traffic. So it's not that Ahrefs miss kind of, we of course we cannot get the search volume of all keywords correctly. So, but usually if a keyword is popular, it is popular. If a keyword has very little volume, it has very little volume. So people just don't understand that.
At the same time, like clicks don't pay the bills. Like I think like the thing with like zero, it's like you need people to hit that page and then convert into either a paid account or a trial account or like activate, start using the product and then stay with the product for a long time. And if you're going to hinge your career on like things that are bringing like 100 clicks a month or whatever, or 200 clicks a month, you need to create so much content. Like if you, like this is the thing I constantly tell people is like if you want to create content that doesn't have a lot of search volume, you should do it. But search isn't the right distribution channel for that content. You need to figure out either how to make it work on social. I love what Atlassian does on like some of their hub pages. They'll have like 6 links to other pieces of content in the middle of the post or pretty high up in the post. And some of that will be to like other search content, but some will be to just like brand content or content that kind of talks about what they believe. And that's the way to like, take something like really high traffic and send people from that page to pages that won't get search traffic, that are going to educate them about how you think about the market or what your tool can do. So I think you can use search content as kind of a launching point to this non-search focused content. But this idea that like every piece of content needs to be used for search, or that like even if people aren't searching for it, there's like this off chance that they might, like I would say out of the spectrum of SEO people out there, we work on accounts that have like pretty high deal sizes. I posted the other day about an account that we worked with. Yeah, it was like a $350K deal, multi-year deal. And like that did not come off of like some esoteric odd term. It was like how is this different than that? Or like, how do we do this thing? And I just like, I don't know, I'd say we work with pretty enterprise accounts, pretty large deal sizes, and we are not seeing that the rarely searched for hyper specific things are what bring like meaningful yield. So I really am hesitant. And it could be that like in the affiliate world, or like, I don't know, like in the dog treat world, that like very like complex, I don't know, like new ingredient dog treats or whatever get a lot of search volume, or they take off, or they trend. But if they trend, they're going to have search volume very quickly in your tools. There is like a little bit of a lag with all keyword tools. But this idea that there's like this secret pool of under the radar keywords that no one can find other than these like brilliant SEOs who know about this thing.
Yes.
It feels very gimmicky to me.
Yeah, that's like you phrased it so much better than me. I think we can cut it as like a little 5-minute snippet and post it like about zero volume keywords because it's so good. Yeah, and back to Docsend and what you're saying about the product that doesn't have a lot of search volume because people don't know it, people don't search for it. So I am very lucky because Ahrefs is not that. Like we are in the industry of SEO and people search for a ton of things like how to do SEO audit, how to build links, SEO tips. So there's like a boatload of search demand for different SEO related topics, which is why we were eating our dog food, or like I was eating my dog food from day one that I've joined Ahrefs, and we heavily relied on search traffic to get customers to Ahrefs. And I always wondered if I ended up at a company like Docsend, which there is no search demand around the topic, what would I do? So you say that you weren't necessarily super successful and made a lot of mistakes, but looking back, let's say you are now put in charge of this kind of company. What would be your channels? How would you approach this kind of problem that the product is not in the industry where a lot of people are searching for educational content, so to say?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a great question. I hope none of the Docsend people listen to this. One, I would lean really heavy into partnerships with accelerators, because like where we were going at, it was like seed rounds, like seed people who were trying to raise a seed round. So I would go really hard on like accelerators and incubators and do partnerships with all of those types of companies that work with startups and give them Docsend for free for a certain amount of time. The other thing that worked really well for Docsend is those data studies. And Alex Poulos, who took over marketing eventually, they released regular stats on like, here's how venture capitalists are engaging with decks, or like all venture capitalists are on vacation this weekend, don't even bother pitching them. And so like regular product data studies, that would be a huge part of it. I think doing more of those. I'd say when you're in a small startup though, going over to the CTO and tapping on the shoulder, be like, hey, can you like query Heroku for me and tell me like how, and I remember it was actually like, they need to query a database and they were like, if you query it wrong, you'll break the app. Like you'll break the app on Heroku. And I was like, okay, I can't do that. Can you help me? He's like, I have 90 other things to do. So I think like what I would do is I would set up infrastructure, like some type of internal tool, so that marketing could query the product data more easily, because it was a really big lift to do that. I would go much harder on social and have like a stronger brand. And I would try and do more advice on how to raise funding, because that was really the audience. It then did transfer a bit into sales, and it is still used in sales a ton today. But I think, yeah, partnerships with accelerators, more data-driven studies, more AdWords on competitor content, and like I think we were really focused on certain competitors, but there was a broader sort of sales enablement motion with like things like HighSpot, which were sort of like overcomplicated in my opinion, and they have their place in the market. But I think like Docsend was good because it was so simple, and so I would focus on competitor content, data-driven studies, partnerships, and then a lot of events, because when we went to events and we explained what the product could do, people were really into it. I think when you look at like a lot of B2B companies, and this is more for like technical audiences, I'm stealing this from the CEO of Datadog who did an interview, but like basically for developer audiences, inbound typically comes from like events and content. So I would also do a lot of content around how to fundraise, maybe even like some type of newsletter, because I think this would have been a bit early, but at the time there was a company called Mattermark, founded by Danielle Morrill, and she, from very early on, had a phenomenal newsletter that was just like, that's what like venture capitalists and people at venture capital backed companies read every day to get a pulse on the news. I would want to have some type of newsletter about who got funded, and who raised and what venture capitalists raised a fund, and kind of give people a pulse of fundraising, so we could have a newsletter and kind of take people off of our content and build a retained audience. So really, that would have been the mix that I would have gone for.
That's a very good one. I like data studies. I'm with you there. So you mentioned that if there was no surge demand for the hypothetical product that you would be doing marketing for, you would do social media marketing, basically. So from my experience, and I guess this is fairly common sentiment in the world of marketing, that people listen to people. So people react and engage a lot more with other people rather than with brands. And I'm seeing this with the example of Ahrefs. So I feel that my personal Twitter account, LinkedIn account, I have much more engagement and reach than Ahrefs branded account. So much so that we tried posting educational content on Ahrefs account. We tried posting some even memes or news jacking on Ahrefs account. And eventually right now, Ahrefs Twitter account is just product updates. So if you subscribe to Ahrefs on Twitter, you'll simply learn about the latest product updates. Sometimes he would announce our events and such, but we stopped trying to engage audience with kind of educational content, newsworthy content. So it's like you subscribe to Ahrefs, it's all about the product. While we have myself, we have Patrick Stocks, who has a sizable following on Twitter and gets a lot of engagement. We have Joshua Hardwick, our head of blog, who he doesn't have a massive following, but he gets engagement as well. Plus Twitter kind of boosts whenever some post is worthy of discussion, worthy of audience engaging with it, they would boost it. Now we have also hired Ryan Law. He has also a sizable audience. So it feels, and we actually kind of try to motivate. We cannot force people to be on social media because this is somewhat a personal thing. You're getting exposed and some people are just not into it. But we try to motivate the members of the marketing team to be active on social and basically share the work that they're doing. Because if I did some work for Ahrefs, which I'm proud of, I want to tweet about it and show it to people who follow me. So when you said that you would do social, would you approach it like that? Would you do social kind of through the not the lens, but using the people who work in marketing, or would you actually do it with branded accounts? Because I haven't really seen very many branded accounts who have incredible traction on social media.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mail Brew, or was it Morning Brew has good traction. But they're very good at posting.
But that's basically news.
Yeah, it's basically news. But yes, so I'd say, going back to it, I think social is designed to build parasocial relationships, and it needs to be with people. No one wants to hang out with a brand. There are some brands that are cool where it's I want to go to their event because I know that they are going to throw a good event. But it's generally I think about the people behind the event, and that's why I know Ahrefs because I know the people behind it. And I'd say with a lot of the most popular software products, I can think of the people behind them. Salesforce has Benioff, Drift had Dave Gerhardt, and I actually think, and I have a ton of respect for Dave, he's built a phenomenal community, but I think there's a risk with having employees be your primary spokesperson, because if that employee leaves, how Dave left Drift and then went to another company, they take that audience with them. So I think, I think there's sort of owned, there's owned and earned media, sort of and I think social media is earned media. You have to earn that algorithmic distribution. So if I was to have a social following, I would really try and make everything go from, we get this traction on social, but we bring it back to the website, we cookie people, and we get their email. And then I tried to turn it into an email newsletter or some type of publication that people say subscribe to. Because I think there's a trend of, and it's quickly changing, of companies kind of just being we're going to get so many visits from search. We publish this content, we get a lot of visits from search, or we publish this post on LinkedIn or Twitter and we get thousands of impressions. But I don't think we can rely on that happening forever. And I think like when there's a LinkedIn algorithm update, you hear all of like the LinkedIn people complaining about like, I'm not getting as much distribution, I'm not getting as much impressions, I'm not getting as much engagement. Or when there's a search algorithm update and you lose all that traffic, and it's like, well, that just turned it off. So I think, it's like I lost my rankings, I've lost my traffic, now this site's toast, or we're just gonna not hit our number. Taking it from, I get these visits from search, or I get these impressions and this engagement from social, and taking it back to something that people subscribe to, where you have their email, because no one can take away an email from you. So if I was to do social, the goal would be like, let's drive them to the site and let's get their email, let's get them to subscribe to what they do, versus us just hoping to keep getting more and more impressions, more and more clicks, and that drive the business, because you are essentially renting that space, whether that's in Google, whether that's on LinkedIn, whether that's on Twitter. You don't own that. You own an email list. So I definitely like do social, but with the goal of an owned audience, like developing an owned audience that we can communicate to directly. And I think the thing that we also don't really count on with search and social is it's both like algorithmic or like performance focused content, where with search you have to like structure the article a certain way, have certain headings, make it meet search intent. And with social, it's like you have to design it for engagement. But with an email, you can send people whatever you want. If they don't like it, they'll unsubscribe. But you don't have to think about like, what is the algorithm gonna do? It needs to like not have scammy words in or whatever to get into spam. But you don't have to think about the algorithms when you have an email list. You can just do what you want to do. And the same goes for YouTube. You have to structure your YouTube content in a certain way, have thumbnails that are going to get clicks, and have you get into the discovery engine. So email allows you to be like really authentic and communicate how you want to communicate. So yeah, I do social, but with the goal of building email.
So I have a list of questions here, but we are not getting to them because as you talk, we keep as fractal, we keep spreading to more and more interesting topics, which is very cool. So you mentioned that when Dave Gerhardt, and yeah, I know him, we actually wanted to connect quite a few times, but because of the time zones, it's always a problem. I need to go to US and stay there more to just connect and network with people. So you said that when he left, he took the community with him. My thoughts about this from my personal perspective, I don't think there's too many people. I'm not sure there's actually anyone who knows about Team Solo but doesn't know about Hrefs. So if I were to leave Hrefs, yeah, people would keep following me, but I'm taking no one from Hrefs because 100% of my following, 100% of people who know me, they also know about the product because I talk about the product so much. So when someone is leaving and they are taking community with them, like they were probably building community which was not based on the company and the product in the first place, which questions the value, like what were you doing, like where were you spending your time if those people didn't at least try out your product? Because I'm sure that out of 100% of people who know, like 100% of people who know me, they know about Hrefs, and I would imagine that at least like, I don't know, 80 to 90% of them have at least tried our free account. So I'm hoping that with my consistent communication about the product, about the value that it brings, about the useful, valuable use cases that might be helpful to people, my audience goes and tries out our software. So
yeah,
I think if you...
Okay, so yes, and I'd say that a lot of your audience has tried out Hrefs. I totally agree. But let's say tomorrow you quit Hrefs and you get a job at BrightEdge or Conductor or ClearScope or some other SEO tool, and you change and you start talking about like literally sort of like, just here's why you only want to use this, here's why you wouldn't want to use any other SEO tool. You could literally take that audience with you and then push it towards a totally different product. So yes, like the audience that you have today has tried that product, but I'd say that's not like a retained, owned audience that Ahrefs has. I'm sure some of them have joined the newsletter. I'm sure some of them have subscribed to YouTube. But if you were to take this audience, if you were to take a new job in the space today and you were able to sell a similar product or a product that was competing for a similar budget or like a similar line item in the budget, I think you could start transferring people into that product. So I think there is risk of having people who are not specifically not like I'd say the way that you would de-risk is having a founder do it who owns the company. And I think that and I also, just to go into this, I think that people are going to start hiring for audience more. Like if you have an audience, it's going to be more advantageous. If you are a sales rep and you have a massive following on LinkedIn and you can post about your product and people will follow you and listen to you, totally. I think this like hybrid creator role, people are going to start hiring for that more. But the best mix, I think, would be like a founder who is also a creator who has their own audience on social and runs their own newsletter. And the person that resonates with me most on that is Jason Cohen from WP Engine, a smart bear on Twitter. He has a phenomenal newsletter. He writes a great blog, and it doesn't directly promote WP Engine. It more actually promotes like growing a startup. But he's been able to build this like massive audience and has a huge amount of respect in the startup space. And it's just part of his nature. Like he's way ahead of the curve. But I think like that is like such a triple threat, like creator, audience developer, founder. That's a way to really own that audience and have it all flow back to your product, or at least be associated with your product, versus like hiring for that, which I think has some inherent risk to it.
So I think this risk is super common in a lot of businesses. How many times a sales representative would change the company and take all their clients with them? How many times like someone working in an agency and having like a roster of clients would start their own agencies and take those clients to themselves? Or a super simple example, a hairdresser. They have their regular clients, and when they change the outlet where they're working, a lot of clients would follow the hairdresser unless they have like convenience in terms of the location of a given outlet, so they would keep preferring the outlet to a hairdresser. So it's very common, and it's not a reason to not do it, essentially, because a lot of businesses are exposed to this kind of risk, that employee, like losing an employee would cost them actual customers and actual audience. But at the same time, in our case, I'm, as an employee, as someone who is able to build and grow an audience and funnel it to our product, I'm doing all in my power to kind of educate my audience on the value they can get from our product. And if they not convert, this is not really my problem. This is the problem of the product. So, like, and again, if I go to another company and start shilling another product, and if people start moving, of course, there's a level of kind of persuasion. So how good you are at communicating the unique value of whatever product you are kind of promoting, but also how much value people are getting from the existing product. So there are like pros and cons to everything, but I think it's still worth it to have kind of your employees building an audience as long as they are promoting your product as well. Because if they're building an audience for themselves as a thought leader, because I'm seeing quite a few people who are marketers in different companies, but when I look at their Twitter account, LinkedIn account, they do a lot of thought leadership content, but they almost never talk about the company where they work, which in my eyes, like in my head, I have a question like, so what is the strategy here? You're working on your personal brand. You're kind of exposing yourself to opportunities as a marketer so that other founders of other companies would like see, oh, he's like talking about interesting things. Should I hire him? But there's no value for the company that you work at. So these seem kind of strange to me.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that also assumes that like people have a strategy with social, and I think our brains have all been broken by feeds. And like people just want attention. They feel like it's good to get engagement. Like when I hear other people talk about like their social strategy, like I'm going to engage in 5 posts. I'm going to post like 10 times a week. And it's like these very like metrics and performance-based benchmarks that they hold themselves to. And it's like, if social doesn't come naturally to you, if you're not like, I got an idea, I'm going to post it this way. Yeah. If you're trying to force it, it's just not going to work. Like it needs to be something that just comes out of you. Like, and I think really, with all forms of marketing, it's really about like playing to your strengths and like choosing to market a product that would benefit from those strengths. Like if your entire audience is on social, and I'd say SEO is like I don't think too many SEO people are Googling best SEO tools and then signing up for that. Like I remember having a conversation with someone that was running a link building tool. He's like, yeah, like our leads don't come from people Googling best link building tool. I think that like SEO is a very online, very social audience, and it's also like very reputation based. So I think like for an SEO tool, it totally makes sense to be very heavy on social. But if you were in, I don't know, like procurement or something that's like less public, less making noise online, less about marketing yourself, maybe social isn't the move. Maybe it's all AdWords or you know, like working with Gartner. So I think it's really dependent on like the product and where your audience is. And I think SEO people are chronically online. So being on social really works for them. There's a few other audiences, knowledge workers specifically, that are chronically online that I also think it works for. But and I will say there's a lot of trade people online as well. So it's not just knowledge workers. It's not just people behind a desk all day. And I think that's more on like TikTok though. But I think it's really about finding where your audience is and then developing that audience, like working to get in front of them there. And maybe that's trade shows. Like maybe it's not social at all. So if you're, you know, what I'd say is if you are reliant on an employee who's like the best public speaker, and that is where because there's an 80-20 rule for a lot of this stuff. And like your employee is just like the best at conferences. He's the best public speaker. And then, or she's the best public speaker, and he or she goes to some other company. That's a huge risk. Same with like if the 80-20 of your company is leads from social and you hire an employee to run all that and they leave, and that's your whole brand, that's like how people know your brand. So I'd say it's like how much risk are you willing to take up with, and how much of your marketing mix or like your lead flow or maybe even like your pipeline is from these like individuals who could leave at any time. So I think like it's really about how much risk are you willing to put up with, and how much of your marketing mix are these people. But I mean, I think it's going to become more, and I think we're going to have to accept some risk. Businesses are going to have to hire people that have an audience versus trying to jumpstart it on their own. And I think that a lot of founders I talk to are not interested in audience development. They don't want to do it. They want to hire people to do it. So I think it's also just something that a lot of CEOs aren't interested in. But I do think it's where things are going, though. I think owned audiences and parasocial relationships are the future of B2B.
I want to talk more about, you said Dave Gerhardt, he built incredible community, to quote you, and you just mentioned the word audience quite a few times. And I know you're involved with the project, I think it's called Audience Plus or something like this.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned like parasocial relationships, building an audience. How do you qualify someone as a member of your community, and how do you know if your community is growing or not? And if we're talking about Facebook pages and someone is a community manager and their goal is to kind of grow the Facebook page, for HREFs it's very easy. People just apply, and like there are a lot of bots on Facebook who would just like apply to any groups, etc. Plus there are a lot of people who want to spam Facebook groups. So the sheer amount of people who belong to a Facebook group is not really indicative of your community. So yeah, this was the context. Now I want to hear your thoughts about this.
All right, so I'm going to steal this from one. I think I'm in your community, but I think there's levels to your community. And I am not in your circle group. I'm not in your Facebook group, but I also like, you're not going to get me to join those because I'm not going to contribute either way. Like it's not how I want to use my time, but I still want to be a member of the community. And I think community doesn't require necessarily logging into a certain platform. I do think like asking people to use Circle is a really big ask because it's not like Circle's not a part of my workflow. And I think if it was like a Slack community or, you know, potentially like a Twitter community, I know those aren't very big, or like a Facebook community, which you're on right now, I'm not really on Facebook anymore either. So it's like, it needs to be somewhere where I already am. And like the ask for me to be somewhere where I'm not. Now, one place I am in a lot is HREFs. So if you had like like a homegrown community that was inside the product, or like there was like a link to it from the top nav, that could be interesting. But to get me to like go to some
there was a link to Circle from the top nav, but it's not a priority thing because again there's priority to everything. You cannot move the useful tools that people are actually using and put the community front and center because this is not. And actually Dmitry, our CEO and founder, he was suggesting that we integrate chat right to the dashboard of Ahrefs, which would be kind of the perfect, as you say, homegrown community. But we had some other hurdles why we didn't do this. But Dmitry had some previous project also related to SEO, where he was also building some dashboards with analytics to help people kind of make sense of their websites and stuff. And he said that he had the chat on the dashboard and it was incredibly active. So that's an interesting thing. I'm not sure we're going to dedicate resources to that. But yeah, that's an interesting one. I wonder, like, if anyone listening can give us examples of SaaS companies that actually have built-in community, I don't know, on the dashboard of their product. I'd love to see that. But yeah, sorry for interrupting.
No,
please
totally. But and I would actually love to see that too. I think there's some risk from I could see product managers not being like, let's get people to use the product that feature I just launched. But I think I'm stealing this from a company called Orbit, and it's orbit.love, and they kind of define levels of a community inside this thing they call the Orbit model. So there's like the level, the most outside level of Orbit is like exploring, and that's people who've they're newcomers or they're like passively observing. Like maybe they see some stuff about Ahrefs on Twitter, but they're lurking. They're not really engaging. And then there's participating. So like maybe they would attend a webinar, or maybe they would respond to a Twitter post or something like that. But they're sort of on the fringes, not fully involved. And there's contributors, and I'd say I would classify myself as probably a contributor to your community. And then and that's people that are putting time and energy into it and engaging with other folks, and they're active participants, not really on the fringes. And then the first level, like Orbit level 1, is leading. So those are people who are organizing or leading, and they're playing a central role in getting other people to join the community. And with each of these roles, there's this concept that Orbit has that I'm a huge fan of. It's like gravity. And like the people in level 1, they've got the most gravity. They pull other people in. And like level 3 has like less gravitational force. So I'm probably butchering this. So Orbit team, if you're listening, I am sorry. But the idea is like the closer you are, the more the further down into like the levels you are, the more gravity you have, the more you pull people in. So I think that's really like the benefit of community, is like the stronger the community, the more people that get pulled into the community. But this idea that like community is binary, I would push back against that. And it's really about like different levels of engagement and different levels of commitment. And I think like I am definitely someone who is participating, but I am not leading. And I am not going to, and it's also just like, I think whether or not you have a login to something is not a good definition of community. It may be like a KPI you want to hit, but I think like the community can be anywhere, whether that's Twitter, whether that's Facebook, but it's more about like how much gravity do you have versus how many logins do you have.
This is very good. I like it a lot. Let's talk about events. Yeah, so you mentioned events quite a few times, and specifically when we were talking about audience, when we were talking about communities. So yeah, we recently started doubling down on events. And for example, the reason why we started doing events in Singapore is very simple. We are physically here. We have a large spacious office where we can easily invite like 60 to 70 people, sit them in chairs and like give an interesting presentation. And so far people were very happy with us sharing useful information with us. So this is just my way of, because like I'm physically located in Singapore and they want an active digital marketing community. I want people to bounce ideas with. I want people to do interesting things, build interesting businesses. And I'm happy to share my knowledge since I'm physically here and like talk to them. But we also this year in November, we want to do a large international event. Like we're hoping to get 500 people in attendance. And obviously we were discussing why. Because hosting a big event for 500 people, especially in Singapore, it's not only a trouble in terms of manpower, it's also very expensive. It's like Singapore is very expensive. So why would someone like Ahrefs need their own event? What do you think? What is the business value of events for SaaS companies?
I mean, I think I remember every good conference I've been to, and probably the bad ones too. Like the relationships that you create at those conferences, those are lifelong bonds I have. Like I know I'm not just like a guy on Twitter to the people I'm communicating with on Twitter. I've met them at Maz's conference, at Distilled conferences back when they used to have those. And those are some of like the most memorable and formative experiences in my entire marketing career. And those are all attached to those brand. And I think like, you know, I used to have this like, I was like, oh man, MozCon, that'd be so cool to go to. Like I hope to do it one day. And I did go to one of the conferences, but it was like an aspirational thing for me. I was like, oh, that's where all like the legit marketers go. That's where the best of the best go to learn about SEO. And I'll also say Distilled through a hell of a conference. I went to, it was called Link Love. I think it was like 2012, maybe 2011. And that's where I first saw Ross Hudgens talk. It's where I first saw Rand. It's where I saw Will Reynolds first talk, and then I applied to work for him shortly after that. Like, I think there is such a connection to taking the online offline and meeting people in the real world and actually like forming real relationships with them. So it's not just about like, oh, it's like an event and we get to talk about Ahrefs and then it's beneficial for our brand, but it's about taking all of that offline, taking everything that's online offline, and then when you go back online, all of those connections are stronger and there's more loyalty and you actually know the other person behind the screen and you relate with them because maybe you had dinner with them or you spoke to them when you were getting coffee and you're like, oh, I know them, they're great. And I think it really forges stronger relationships, and I think it can also associate your brand with something bigger than what you are. Like there was a conference I used to go to in San Francisco called Topo, and it was a company that was bought by Gartner, and they kind of did like account-based marketing and demand gen consulting, and the company was really small. Like it was a team of consultants. Like I think it was under probably 20 people or so. I don't quote me on that, but the conference was huge, and like everyone wanted to be there. I met so many interesting people, and it was a great chance to like meet like-minded people, and everything was associated with this consulting firm. Same with Distilled. Like Distilled was not huge, but their events were big, and it was meaningful to go there, and you learned a lot. And it was this like feeling of like it's a friendly place, it's an enjoyable time, and it just got you to kind of feel good about the consultancy. So like yes, it probably drove some pretty big leads for Distilled. It also I know it drove other leads for other agencies that presented there. But it also just kind of created this loyalty and this feeling of importance, and it's not just like a scrollable feed that you can move past. It's really this like memory in time that you were enjoying yourself, and I think the other thing, just to go back to when we were talking about community, the role of an SEO person or the role of any individual contributor that's not on a large team, it can be pretty isolating. So having a space to meet with your entire community and then have that associated with your brand, I think that's very powerful. I think that is something they will likely remember for, like, how many vacations do people really take? In America, like none. They're practically illegal. But if you if you get flown out to like a cool location and you meet a bunch of friends and you have like free food, free drinks, like you're gonna remember that. You're like, this is a great time, and it's all because of this brand. Maybe it's not that direct, but you are gonna have some positive associations with it. So I think so much of our time is behind screens, so much of our time is alone in consoles, that if you can get a group of your most loyal folks, those people with the most gravity, all together in one room, it's going to be net benefit for the company.
This is so good. Can we just cut it out and put it on the landing page of our conference?
Please.
I'm serious. I think we'll like, this is so good, like to show people why they should attend the conference, that we literally can just cut it out and put it on our conference page. This is
absolutely, man.
This is so amazing. This is so amazing. Now, yeah, like this is incredibly persuasive. I agree with you pretty much on everything, and this was exactly my experience going to conferences. I was again lucky that Dmitry, our CEO and founder, didn't really question whenever I said that. I just joined the company and was like, oh, there's like PopCon happening in Las Vegas, and I just came to Singapore from Ukraine. I'd never really been anywhere, and the prospect of going to the US, to Las Vegas for a conference, I couldn't explain to Dmitry what the value would be, but I just wanted to go and kind of hang out with the cream of the crop, like to see what's happening, to broaden my view. And Dmitry didn't even question it. He was like, yeah, sure, like get the tickets, go. I was like, shit, this is like an all-paid trip to Las Vegas. I will meet all the top ICOs. And I think this really helped me a lot with my career, with my understanding of what's happening. If you're a global company, you're working in a global company and you don't get out, you don't get to communicate with people from other parts of the world, from other walks of life, yeah, you're very isolated, and that might hurt your performance. And yeah, like you say, like with the vacations, yeah, it's such a good change of scenery, and this is the change of scenery while you are kind of in your natural habitat, because like you're all around like-minded people. It's sometimes hard for me to get along with, I don't know, the husbands of my wife's friends, because this is usually how the social connections work, because they are from different industries, and I'm like, it's hard for me to talk to them. But when I'm like in the community of other marketers, of other people from the tech space, I just keep like talking, learning, helping, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So in that regard, what can we do with our event to make sure that the atmosphere would be right, that people would get the most value? And most importantly, so what I was thinking, like, because from the smaller events that we ran, we were always doing, of course, the feedback form, and people were consistently telling us that they want more kind of networking opportunities, which we didn't do a good job of facilitating. So I wondered, like, when between the talks, I don't know, during lunchtime or like during the networking time, people go into the foyer area or like corridors or whatnot. Some people, and myself included, I'm naturally not very extroverted, so I cannot just go to random people, join random groups and say, oh, like, can I talk to you? But how can the organizer of an event facilitate those like connections and networking? Like, what has been your experience?
Okay, so I'm definitely not an expert event marketer at all, but
you're an expert attendee.
from attending some events, what I can talk about is, I think when you break it up and you have a lot of small tracks, so if it's like, oh, this is like the link building track, and this is like the content track, and this is the technical track, that actually kind of breaks apart the experience, and there's not as much shared experience. So I think that having a single track that everyone be like, oh, did you see so-and-so's talk? Yeah, what'd you think about it? Versus like, oh, no, I was like on the other side and there was like a 15-person group talking about skiing. Like, you want to have it all be a shared experience versus lots of little fragmented experiences. And then the other thing is not having it be like a thing that shuts down. Like, you want to definitely push people to go to the talks. But even at, like, if someone's really getting along and having lots of time to socialize, you want to let them continue doing that. You don't want to make the events mandatory, but you do want to promote going and watching the talks. But I think having breaks in between the talks, like the most people can really sit down and pay attention in TikTok world now is like maybe an hour and a half without going on their phone. And I think giving people a break in between every other talk for like 30 minutes. And it's like, I think Moz and Distilled did a really good job with that, where it's like, oh, we've got coffee coming in, and now it's like a snack, and now it's lunch. And they did have like some like small groups that would do like individual like table talks and whatnot during lunch, which was smart. But I think breaking it up so it's not just constant education, and there's also a lot of room for for socializing, I should say, is necessary. Because if I talk to anyone who's like going to events professionally, like, I'm not there for the talks, I'm there to socialize. I think a lot of people are not going to learn because realistically, if I get like wild SEO, I can't implement it tomorrow. Like I read stuff, I retain stuff, but like I can't just change how we're operating on a dime. It's fun to learn, but like I'd rather socialize, build connections. Like that's much more valuable for me than hearing about like some new way to approach, I don't know, like title tag optimization. Like I don't really care that much. We can figure out something that's like unique to us. So whenever I go to an event, socialization and meeting new people and networking is like the primary focus. And if I can get some education, great. But like there's a whole thing with speed. Like, it's not about education, about like partially entertainment as well, which I'm just like, I'd rather make connections than like go to a snazzy talk. So I think really carving out time for socialization while also making room for education, but making socialization kind of the primary. And the way to do that, and the way to create like, you can't just like stick a bunch of like introverted SEO people in a room and be like, go talk. It's like you need something to be around. So whether that is like a coffee break or I like, you know, I don't know, like some type of event that's socializing. I don't want to make it around drinking, but that also works very well, like a free bar call or something like that. But I think that you need to bake that in to give people the ability to feel comfortable socializing, or else you're only going to get extroverted people approaching. And I think in an SEO conference, that's going to be tough to do.
Okay, we can close the section about events. Thanks a lot. We'll rethink our approach to our conference. Let's talk about one of my favorite topics, attribution. So I think Rand on the SparkToro blog, he has an article, I think it's titled Provable Marketing Attribution is a Boondoggle. I learned this word from the title of this article. I still don't know how to pronounce it correctly. But here at Ahrefs, we don't really track the attribution of any of our marketing activities. And when we were communicating via email about this podcast, about this conversation, you mentioned attribution as one of the topics that you would be happy to talk about. So what is your position on attribution? How, again, let's start from attribution from SEO. So you have SEO traffic coming to your website. How do you manage the attribution of this SEO traffic?
Yeah. So this is like a really political question. And I think what I'd say is that attribution is useful, but it's imperfect. And the way that we typically do it is either through, if for B2B, you need to be connected to the CRM. Like, there's other people much smarter than me that you should talk about this that do marketing mix modeling. But for me, I'm pretty basic. So it's SEO. I'm either looking at like linear attribution, which is taking all the touches and dividing it by the number of touches to give the certain amount of credit of the conversion. So if they visit like 10 pages on the way, each page gets 0.1.
How do you set it up? Can you do this in GA or in Google Analytics?
You can't do it in GA. You need to be connected to a CRM. So it's for B2B at least. You need to be connected to a CRM. So you're either using HubSpot or there's a Salesforce tool called Visible that we tend to use a lot. That's for bigger companies. HubSpot makes it really easy. Like I think if you are a small business and you're B2B, it makes, or you're a startup that's growing, like getting on HubSpot makes so much sense. It's just so easy to use. It's come such a long way.
Do you need to use their content management platform to make it easy, or you can use it with any website?
You can use it with any website. You just need to have their JavaScript on there. I am not a huge fan of their CMS. If anyone at HubSpot wants to talk about why, I'm happy to have that chat offline. But so it's just, you just need their JavaScript on the site. And if someone, and you can make it so if someone opts into one of your forms, you can basically say like, hey, you agree to be tracked. But with HubSpot, you can literally see each touch along the customer journey on their way to conversion. So you can see like, and then you can also, if they're using the HubSpot CRM or they're syncing deal data from Salesforce back to HubSpot, you can see like the size of the deal. So that tweet that I posted around like that 350K deal, we saw that because we were using HubSpot, and that HubSpot was synced to Salesforce, and it brought that deal data back. So I think like with GA, you can't get down to
when you say you saw that, in what form did you see that? Did you see
there's like an attribution report in HubSpot, and I'm sure I can like grab a picture of it, but like they literally can show you like with HubSpot you can filter to the URL.
No, I mean you saw a potential big lead in your analytics?
Not in HubSpot's analytics, yeah, not in GA4.
In HubSpot analytics, yeah.
Yeah, so HubSpot has its own like analytics platform, and I'd say GA4 is like,
how did it know that this is a big deal client?
Because they're able to, because you're with HubSpot, you're like generally putting in your email into a form, so it syncs the email and every visit that person has done before putting in the form to like their previous visits, and then it goes into the CRM. So as a sales rep starts working that lead, that record is attached to that deal, so you can actually see.
So the sale, like who determines the value of this opportunity? Who puts this as like 100K over per year lead?
That would be the sales. Yeah, the sales rep is committing to a certain amount of pipeline that they think they can close the deal for. So this takes a while. Like big deals don't close instantly. So it's like we'll get the leads 1 month, and then we'll see, maybe a few weeks later, a few months later, what that deal is worth. And for some companies we work with, like their sales cycle can be over a year. There's only one company I'm thinking of where their sales cycles. It's a very complex product. It goes through all their financial systems, and it takes a long time to implement. It takes a long time to scope the deal. But yeah, so that's coming from, like, we're not saying that deal's worth a ton. It's a sales rep who has met with the company who is saying we can close them for this much. And with HubSpot and with Visible, although Visible is a little bit more complicated, you can basically like segment down to who comes into the site from organic search, and you can use certain filters to be like, what pages did they land on?
Let's make it specific. I really like to make things specific. And since you're mentioning this specific lead, and you said that it's like 350K per year opportunity, and you have that analytics. So first of all, your agency website is like a one-pager.
Yes.
So what touch points are we talking about?
Oh, this was for a client. My mistake. I'm sorry.
This was for, okay.
Yeah. I don't have any sales reps. I do have
still.
Sales
so you have this attribution. You have this, like you said, linear attribution, where it like would determine weights of different pages of. Okay, so you have this heavy lead. You have all the attribution you need. What is the takeaway between this lead and the attribution that you see on that lead?
So, I'm going to give out a little bit of what we do here. So I'd say when you really have significant lead volume, what you can do is, I'm going to tie this actually to rankings and Ahrefs now, but you can, I know you didn't want me to do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. You can basically see which segments of the site or which topics on the site bring in the most revenue. And then you can also tie that to the keywords that those pages rank for. And if you were to use the rank tracker in Ahrefs and basically tag all of the rankings for that topic into a I believe you call them tags. I think of them as categories. You can see how much market share you have for that topic. So instead of chasing how much revenue, or excuse me, apologies, let me rewind there. Instead of chasing like, oh, this gets us a lot of traffic, you can say this gets us a lot of revenue, or this gets us a lot of pipeline. And sometimes the topics that get the most traffic, those aren't where the most qualified deals come in from, or the best deals, or the largest deals. So instead of looking at where do we get the most traffic, which is generally what SEOs tend to report on, you can figure out how much market share do we have for the topics that bring in the most revenue. And that's why I actually really like the rank tracker from Ahrefs, because that whole visibility and market share report, if we can pick 15 different topics that we want to go after, and then say we have this much market share, this brings in the most revenue, who cares until it's thousands of visits less than the other topics, this is where we need to focus all of our efforts, not what's just going to make the chart go up of sessions, but really where do the highest revenue generating deals come in from, and how do we get more market share in that topic? So I think it takes you from focusing on rankings for terms that maybe get a lot of clicks to rankings for terms that bring in the most money. But
okay, now
sorry, just to challenge
do the but.
Yeah, do the but. So like I was working with one company a little while ago, or we were working with one company a little while ago, I should say. Growth Plays team found a deal in HubSpot. And we were like, oh, this lead came in. This was the first touch on the page. And now it's like a 100K deal. And they visited 5 other pages. Then they submitted a demo form. And now that deal looks like it's going to close. And we talked to the founder. He was like, oh, yeah, I know them. I met them at an event. They've actually been a customer before. Like, we've been talking on LinkedIn since then. So it's like attribution doesn't tell the full story. It just kind of tells like web traffic visits. So there's a there's always a but with attribution. It's very imperfect. And I do agree with Rand, like it can be a boondoggle. Sure. I don't use that word myself either. It's not very common. But I think that when you have enough scale and you're bringing in hundreds or thousands of leads a month, figuring out what pages people go to and then tying deal size and closed won revenue to those pages is really valuable. And if you can back those pages out into keywords that they rank for and then figure out how much market share you have for the topic, that allows you to focus your SEO efforts more on revenue than on page views.
I definitely agree about the exercise of determining topics that can bring you fat leads and tracking your market share and using Ahrefs rank tracker. Can't really advise against that, but I also have a but. Let's do a thought experiment. You have a bunch of pages that a given lead has touched before converting, and your attribution software has determined weights, and you have like smaller leads and you have bigger leads, and they definitely were converted by different content, right? Naturally. So, thought experiment. If you take, some experienced marketer on your team, you give them a list of pages with content targeting different, potential customer personas, and tell them to kind of grade them, like, is this content going to bring me fat clients, or is this content going to bring me small businesses, blah, blah, blah. And they would just manually grade them, just snap judgments within an hour, depending on how much content is there. But actually you produce that content in the first place, so you have to make those decisions in advance. And then you use the attribution software to see if the calls that an experienced marketer or content marketer was making are correct. Do you see where I'm going with this?
I have an idea.
Okay, do you think that we even need attribution? It proves your theory, because you need to decide what kind of content you need to put out before you create it. So attribution can only tell you how the content you already have performed, but you have to make decisions when you create this content. This is something we're doing right now at Ahrefs, because we have developed a lot of functionality that is useful for larger teams, and we increasing our prices. We're going after bigger enterprise customers, yada, yada, yada. And that at our content marketing department, we now understand that, okay, large enterprise clients, we don't need to teach them how to get backlinks. They already have all the backlinks. This is why they're enterprise, they're big enough. We need a different kind of content. So we're making those decisions consciously. We understand who are we targeting, what these people are interested in, what keywords they're searching for, and we create those content. So do we even need attribution to tell us what we already know, that this content is targeting at these people?
I think Ahrefs is really unique, and you have a lot of freedom to do what you want to do and to execute the ways that you want to execute. But if you're in a larger organization where you have to prove your value and say, I did this, it brought in that, there is a real benefit to being able to point to a chart and say, we wrote this, it brought in that, we have this much market share, if we get more budget, we can take more market share. So I think you're really unique, and you're an SEO tool. You understand the value of content. That's the whole company is focused on that. But if you're, selling ERP software or whatever, and no one really understands what content's doing or how it's benefiting the business, you pull up a chart that says, listen, forget about the sessions, forget about the clicks. This piece of content or this category of content brought in $1 million in pipeline last year. We have 1% market share. Give us $140,000 more to fill out the rest of the topic and own it completely and bring in more revenue. So I think in companies where buy-in is harder to come across and you have to really work for it, it's really valuable. And I'd say, Rand talking about attribution being a boondoggle, I'm sure Rand works with some companies that maybe it's harder to get buy-in in, but like Rand has worked for himself for 15 or 20 years now. So it's like he's the person he has to convince. When you are going up against, especially if you're working for leadership that doesn't really see the benefit of content, these tools are really, really helpful. So I think when not everyone's on the side of investing in content, attribution can really be used as leverage for why you need more budget or why you should continue investing in search or content in general.
This is great. This is great. Like, yeah, we are definitely in our own bubble. Like the curse of knowledge, right? It comes so naturally to you that you cannot understand how can one question that this is going to work. Like how else? But then again, I again, back when we're doing, I don't know, barbecue with our neighbors or something, and I talk to husbands of my wife's friends who are not into all that, and they are clueless about like even the most simple things. So yeah, it's not necessarily that the CEOs of tech businesses are clueless, but they are not necessarily marketers or content marketers. If they're engineers and they're good with code, they're good with different technologies, they might not understand how like sales work, because again, sales and marketing come naturally to some people, engineering and technologies come naturally to different. So yeah, that is a very good insight of how marketing attribution, even if not perfect, can help you convince that your strategy is working. Because it's one thing to say that like it is working, it is other thing like, can you prove me that it's working? And you're like, oh shit, I cannot just prove it with words, I need to show something. That makes a lot of sense. And we have 10 minutes left. I specifically didn't want to bring up this topic earlier. Do you know what this topic is?
No, we can skip it though if it's bad.
No, it's AI.
Oh,
I want to.
do we really want to talk about that? That's boring.
No, I still want to talk a little bit with you about that. So you have an agency. By the way, how many people work at your agency?
8.
8 people.
Yeah.
Just quickly, what are the roles?
So, okay, we got, I would say, 3 people on the editorial team. We have 2 people on the technical team, someone who's in charge of like account management and project management. And then we've got a really brilliant guy doing content strategy and sort of like opportunity mapping. And then we got me.
Final question, topic, whatever. So you had you tweeted a prediction. AI content from Jasper et al. Is going to get adopted big time by SEO teams. Publishing velocity will go up, content quality will take a back seat, and the content will rank. But like most search shortcuts, SEOs will learn into AI too hard, and Google will hammer it. I guess this was on the money with what we've seen lately with Google punishing a lot of websites that allegedly were generating their content with AI. That being said, and since you're saying that your use case is still early, I still want to kind of ask you, where do you see value going forward? Because right now I'm fairly skeptical of the value of AI in its current form, as in like ChatGPT 4, but I can see if they improve their model further, I definitely see that it could be useful in many, many ways. So what are you specifically looking forward? Because on the other hand, AI can just see what's online and kind of regurgitate it. It cannot really go offline into the heads of professionals with knowledge who didn't necessarily put it online. So there's still value in unique ideas, and AI still cannot do this unless it becomes sentient and would be able to do the same stuff as a human being. But what specifically you are looking forward to in your workflows, and how AI will help you specifically?
Yeah, okay, great question. I think that with where AI is going, and again, not an expert here, I I think a lot of work that was done with SEO was like give it to the really junior person and they're going to go like find the individual questions that these articles are asking, or they're going to go manually review these pages and see if like what topics they bring up, or I think there was just a lot of like data entry work and very junior level work that was farmed out, and maybe you would use like someone on Upwork to like research the content and talk about how many images does it have, or is it written from what perspective, or what facts do they cite? And I think you can use AI to do that stuff really quickly. And I think where things are shifting is we're going to be moving away from like generic writers trying to kind of fake being an expert to using experts that can edit and push back on the AI. Because when we do try and use AI internally to create like sort of expertise or utilize them to help with research and content briefs, the biggest trick with AI is that it's wrong at times. You need to know how to push back. And I think that AI can really help you do some writing. And I use AI a lot as a writing assistant. I'll have it reword things. I'll have it change things for clarity. I'll have it challenge ideas, come up with transitions. And it can be very good at that. It can be very good at rewriting and predicting and transitioning content. But I think the role of like, I am an artist, I sit down and I write a 3,000 word blog post, and it takes me half a week or a week to do that, and then that's my contribution. I really think we're going to move away from this like artisan, bespoke, unique content to moving a lot faster with the help of an assistant who can help you write. And I don't think humans are going to go away from it, because I did try and do something the other day with AI, and the output was really good, but there was like 4 or 5 things that were critically wrong that would have totally challenged the expertise of it. So it's about having that business acumen to challenge it that I think is really critical right now. But where do I see this going? I don't like, Google's always going to fight against spam, and the way that people used it was being as lazy as possible. And I think there's this a tendency in the SEO space to do the bare minimum that you need to do to rank versus like building a moat. And generating dozens of articles a day and publishing them isn't a moat. Like, if anyone can do it in the click of a button, so can you. So you need to find a way to like make it unique and hard to repeat, and not just something that anyone with an account for Jasper can go and spit out. So I'd say I think AI can be a great research assistant. I think it can be a great editor, especially if you're alone in a company and you're like, hey, can you help me with this passage? Can you I'm having a hard time connecting these 2 dots. Like, what are some ways to do that? The outputs of that are generally pretty good. I think it can be really helpful at taking maybe your rough draft and reframing it so it's easier to read, or more cohesive, or it can connect the dots better. But I don't think it's this thing that's going to, you press a button and out comes the final draft. Because if we do that, we're just going to have a sea of very similar generic content. And I also think when I think of a company that I really like and admire, Basecamp, 37 Signals is one of them. And they have a ton of written content, and that is not SEO content for the most part. Their blogs, or they did this one thing when they launched Hey, where they were email is a dumpster fire, and they had a video set up, and they were just pushing emails getting printed to a printer over an IoT device into a fire. And I want to see more marketing like that. If anything, if content becomes a bit of a commodity and just super easy to generate, I think it's actually going to push us to be more unique. So I think if ChatGPT or Jasper or whatever can level the playing field, and anyone can create this SEO article, then we're gonna have to push ourselves to be more unique. So I'm excited about that. And I think really if we're talking about really what changed SEO, I think tools, and I have a lot of respect for both the Market Muse team, the ClearScope team, the Phrase team, all those people. But those tools, especially I had access to Market Muse very early on, and I will say it was extremely effective before people knew about topical comprehensiveness. But this idea that these tools tell you to help tell you what to put in your article, and to put them in your article, you will rank better. It still works. And we're big users of ClearScope internally. I think it's very helpful for topical gap analysis is how I frame it. But I think it kind of leads the writing today. I think a lot of writers kind of let it do its job for you, similar to like how AI can do the job for you. And if you just use ClearScope and you're like, I'm just going to get a high score and then I'm going to publish it, that is not a moat. Same with like just using AI, that is not a moat. And I think ClearScope, and I'm not saying like ClearScope or market views are not helpful, it's just one signal to look at. You still need uniqueness. You still need to have a unique take or a unique point of view, and the article itself needs to stand out. It needs to be different. So I think the same way that like ClearScope can help you create something really great or really generic, AI can do the same thing. I think AI is a bit more of like a feedback loop where it can help polish off your writing and really help you create versus just help you kind of edit and figure out your gaps. But I'd say like a bad craftsman kind of blames his tools. But to give you some credit, Tim, we work with a lot of B2B businesses that are pretty, like they're tech businesses. They move quickly. They try and adapt to new trends. And a lot of them that have gone on demos with AI tools, they're not exactly like wowed by them. They're not like, oh, this is going to make my job so much easier. It's like, well, it's just going to make me have to edit things that aren't great. So I don't think we're there yet. But I think there are certain ways to use these tools to move faster and to increase your cadence. But again, just to kind of challenge myself here, cadence isn't going to matter if everyone can produce the same thing. So I do think this is going to push us to be more unique. And when I think of like a really like SEO is such an entrenched topic on the internet. There's every post that Ahrefs writes on its blog, someone else has written something on that topic before usually. However, you guys find a unique way, or you guys and you people find a unique way to approach a topic, to have a unique take, to be differentiated. And if you used OpenAI or Jasper or CopyAI to help you write that, that doesn't matter. It's really like the unique ideas that you all are bringing forward because of your domain expertise. And that's something that really can't be taken away or replicated by AI. I think like no matter how many, and no matter what kind of database or like what is it, RAG, like retrieval augmented generation, that Patrick Stocks, who put all of his thoughts into like an AI, it's not going to take a new concept and just totally understand it like he would. So I think as the field changes, as new ideas emerge, that's another space for people like Patrick to really have a unique take and to do true thought leadership versus like write me an article about this existing topic that's kind of a blend of everything else out there. So I think it has some potential, but it's not the answer. And like looking at this algorithm update right now, yeah, people are getting crushed because they took the easy way out. It worked for a little bit. Google seems to be self-correcting. I don't know though if Google can fully get AI. I think they've like the people who are posting their sites getting crushed. It's like the worst content I've ever seen. Like it's total gibberish. It's things that like, because there used to be a tool called Writer's Access or like spinning, like article spinning was like that's like the level we're at. So I think Google probably doesn't know fully what's AI created and what's not. I don't actually think that matters. I think engagement matters way more than like what created the content. But your disappointment with these solutions is totally valid. They're not going to replace a writer anytime soon, but I think they can help writers go faster. I think they can challenge writers. I think if you know how to use them effectively, they can push you to be better, and they can give you new ideas that you wouldn't have had on your own.
GH, that was amazing. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. It went completely in a different direction from what we discussed over email, but I think it was absolutely amazing. I feel I just got a consultation that I didn't pay you for, so at least I can say, well, I can pay you saying thank you. That was amazing.
Thank you so much for having me on, Tim. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.